So
All
now
about fiction.
I need to know this. So you guys come up with all these great ideas, these kind of innovations. Do you own them?
Sort of.
Sort
Georgia
of.
Tech, the Georgia Tech Research Corporation owns the intellectual property that I create using facilities at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech makes no claim whatsoever on any student-based intellectual property that was created. So, for instance, when Mike created the arm sleeve,
The sleeve.
didn't use any Georgia Tech resources. We didn't go to use sewing machines or anything like that. And so Georgia Tech made no claims on that. So that's 100% his. This, on the other hand, we are using Georgia Tech facilities.
This is what?
This is the putter.
The putter.
The 3D printed, the tools are very expensive. And so then we get into discussion, and they actually did release this IP to Caroline as well.
So Caroline has this
IP, intellectual property.
Intellectual property has filed a patent. It's patent pending, as they say.
And that's going to belong to Caroline.
Correct. It takes five years, and the co-inventors. There's a variety of co-inventors. I'm named on it, as well as some other students.
Wow.
It takes roughly 5 years, half dozen years for a patent to get fully prosecuted.
Right.
So we're a long way from that becoming a fully patent.
So in 5 years' time, we can't afford you.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's what I'm hearing.
all you got to do is just double the salary that I'm making right now, and I'll just be happy. I mean, if we stick right there, that's fine.
We'll talk.
Okay, we'll take that offline.
But we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to go into Cosmic Queries portion of this Cosmic Queries edition. Stay tuned. We're back. Star Talk, Cosmic Queries. It's a materials world, excuse me.
Yes, not the
Plural,
Madonna
more
kind.
than one. There's more than one. Metals, ceramics, polymers.
More than one kind of material. Yes, indeed. Jud, how can we find your where do we find your creations?
Go to materials.gatech.edu. That's the Institute for Materials. We've also got a Twitter. Jud Reedy is on Facebook and LinkedIn. There's only 4 other Jud Reedys around, and all of them are dead. So I'm the last one around. So
that'd be READY, Jud Reedy, and that's 2 Ds, right?
No, 1D.
1D, excuse me. So Gary, you got the questions this time from our Patreon members. So let's from the Patreoniverse. So let's do it.
So this is a long question from Jason M. in Bentonville. Biomimicry is a fascinating field of research, both in athletics and robotics. Are we currently using it in the exploration of outer space and other planets, Jud?
Most of the exploration, for instance, on Mars is geared at making larger things. Now, we do have the helicopter that's able to fly around, but I think what Jason's asking is little tiny, like insect type drones, which certainly the Department of Defense here in the United States is exploring for sure. Very small insect-like drones. I think the challenge that you would have doing that on an outer space application, some sort of exploration, will be capability of that individual drone, as well as powering it and its survivability in general. Many of the larger rovers are designed to have good power systems and heaters to survive the very cold nights that will destroy a lot of the electronics. But it certainly there's an extension of larger rovers, but also small things like CubeSats, like we're doing here at Georgia Tech in the Center for Space Hardware Assembly, Fabrication, and Testing that I direct.
All right.
When I'm not doing sports.
No. So here's one. I've got to try and pronounce this correctly. Syzygy.
Don't be like Chuck now, messing up everybody's name.
So you make the sense of this. SYZYGY.
Oh, syzygy. That's
Syzygy.
No one actually has that name. But syzygy is an astronomical term, and nobody's named that. So that's just their handle for sure.
All right. So that's
what's syzygy?
Yes.
What's it mean, man?
I'm lost in space with that one.
Okay, it's the only word where it's at SYZYG. It has like 4 or 5 consecutive letters, which when written in script all dip below the line. There's a stupid little fact about it. Syzygy is when any 3 objects that are part of an orbital system have the same azimuth in space. So, an eclipse, the sun, moon, and the earth are in syzygy. Either a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse. That's all it is. Okay.
Gotcha.
Syzygy. Or as I mangled it, syzygy. Anyway, here's the question. Take an imaginative punt at how nanotechnology will impact human health and improve human abilities. Go on, Jud.
And Jud, before we begin, I've heard people not use nano properly. Nano means 1/1000th of, and they talk about a nanobot, and it's something that you can hold in two hands,
And
right?
It's sitting on a table.
It's sitting on a table. That's not a nanobot. That's a full-fledged bot. If it were nano size, you wouldn't be able to see it. So Jud, how are you guys using the prefix nano?
Yeah, nano is just 10 to the minus 9. So it's a thousandth of the size of a human hair. Very, very small structures. But nano in the 90s got a really good name. There's a lot of funding thrown behind it. So everybody's just slapping nano on whatever. Micro would be a better phrasing,
Micro, right.
which is 10 to the minus 6 zeros instead of 9 zeros.
Mm-hmm.
So how will nano affect things? Well, first of all, our entire body is already nanostructured. So it's very natural for us to begin to interface at those length scales that Mother Nature has already figured out over many millions of years.
Right.
Now humankind is able to start engineering at those scales. So certainly interfacing with any of the electrical aspects of our body, like our eyes, ears, tactile senses, any sort of paralysis, like your central nervous system, those are there. We definitely use nanotechnology to engineer, say, the titanium implants that you might have in your hip replacement. We already do that now. You've also got polymeric implants, ceramic materials. All of these are engineered, maybe not necessarily at the nano level to the minus 9 zeros, but certainly the micro level.
Let me ask you this. Does both you and Neil, so does the engineering of something like mNRA, does that considered nanotech since you're working on what is clearly a cellular level?
I'd say, yeah. I think
cellular is much bigger than mNRA.
Well, cellular is bigger than
what
mNRA.
I would say,
That's what I'm saying.
I can summarize this.
Working within the cellular.
I can summarize this. You cannot build something more intricate than the scale of the tools you're using. You can't, right? So if you're going to put together a building and it's made of bricks, sure, bricklayers can do that, okay? But if the building is made of cells and all you have are forklifts, you can't build it, okay? So the scale of the tools has to match the scale of what it is you are assembling if you want to control what you're assembling. And often, medically, we will co-opt what are already biological tools that your body has in order to build or destroy cells that are smaller than the size of our tools. But in
so
the limit...
but wait a minute, let me push back. So you're not counting the manipulation of those readily available tools, although they serve other purposes. If you are co-opting them, you have turned them into so-called the tools of your particular trade.
Yes, but they have to, like you can control enzymes, right? That can then make something else happen. Sure, but the enzyme is still a tool in that sense that is doing the work for you, and the size of the enzyme is commensurate with the size of what it is it's trying to make happen. So, Jud, are you with me on that? Do you agree with me there?
Yes, certainly. And the tools that we have to do nanotechnology did not exist when I was born, and they're just now advancing where we can physically manipulate individual atoms if we need to, or in the DNA sense that you're able to alter aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next question. Zeki Majed asks, would we reach a point where biomechatronics would be advanced enough to help us adapt to something like zero-G without long-term complications that it carries right now?
I would say the challenges with long-term space flight first depends on where you're at. I mean, because we spent over a year in Earth orbit. Both Russians and Americans. I think Scott's a little bit shy of 1 year, but certainly cumulatively.
Scott Kelly.
Scott Kelly, exactly.
He's on a first name basis with these folks. Okay.
That's how we roll at Georgia Tech. We've got a great symposium on space innovations.
We've had Scott Kelly as a guest on Star Talk, so there.
There we go. Good guy. His brother's a good guy as well.
Yeah, and Scott says he's the better looking of the twins of them. Right.
He does say that. Yes, that's a very funny statement for sure. So we so around the Earth, you're protected from the radiation. You're within the magnetic field, so that's keeping the cosmic particles from doing you harm. Now, if we go to the moon or the Mars or Enceladus or wherever, we're outside of that range and maybe even increase radiation. For instance, if we're sending humans to the vicinity of Jupiter, that I think is the major impediment to life. It's not the zero G. That affects your bones and a little bit of your vision and other sorts of things. But I think the primary concern is going to be the cosmic ray and the other radiation impacts at a cellular level, and that's going to be tough to overcome. We're going to have to build in mechanisms in the spacecraft to prevent that radiation from penetrating the human bodies, whether it's simple things like water.
Or would you build in the mechanism to the human dermis, like what we do with sunscreen? We slather that on top. But is there, when you talk about nanotech, like, wouldn't you be able to, figure out a way to put a barrier underneath your fourth layer of skin there?
Potentially. The sunscreen works because of the wavelength of ultraviolet light, whereas the wavelength of these cosmic particles is vastly different, that it may not be able to prevent. But that's a really good concept.
Robert Bork has asked, is there any organism that biomimicry could replicate to take on climate change that would be better than the possible technology advancement we could make?
I just really like the change of heart that Robert Bork has. Last time I saw him, and he was a strongly conservative Supreme Court nominee. And now for him to be concerned about climate change, I'm really glad he's picked up some science books and put down the law books.
Nice to see people change.
Yeah, everybody can change. It shows that. So is there an organism? Well, the problem with climate change is that we're changing the carbon inside the Earth into gaseous carbon, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, which is creating differences in temperature, both high and cold. You don't call it global warming anymore because it's both high and low. So the ability to store that carbon dioxide or do something with it would be great. So you can pump it into the ocean, the bottom of the ocean, they say, but then that makes the ocean acidic and is no good for the fish. Or you can pump it into old wells like caves and that sort of thing, and hopefully it'll get dissolved back into the rocks. Right. Or you can let trees
pump it down into basalt.
Yep. Trees convert the carbon dioxide on their own, but the vast majority of conversion is actually from plankton in the ocean, as opposed to like the rainforest. Certainly, cutting down the rainforest is no good from a perspective of sustainability, absorbing that. But if you could engineer an algae-like substance, that would be a very useful material to convert that CO2 into, say, oxygen, which could be useful. Now, converting too much into oxygen has its own trouble as well. So Earth is at a really nice Goldilocks point. We're not like Venus, which has way too much carbon and greenhouse gases, and not like Mars, which has hardly any at all. We're at kind of a nice point, but the problem is...
Wait, just to be clear, Mars is basically 100% CO2. There's just very little of it.
Very thin, yes.
Right. So all the gas that is there is actually greenhouse gas, but it can't trap the heat because it's too thin.
Too thin of an atmosphere. So, but really what you're saying is the idea, some mitigation might happen through capture, but the real deal is we have to stop putting carbon into the atmosphere. We got to stop with the carbon. We got to stop with the methane. These greenhouse gases that we're pumping into the atmosphere on such a gigaton basis, we got to stop that.
But clearly, Bork doesn't want to do that. He wants Jud to invent something that he can keep putting carbon in there, and then Jud takes it out. That's the whole point of the question.
Right.
Yeah. I think just the production of the CO2 needs to slow down, and people say, well, volcanoes spew out a whole bunch of CO2, but you can very easily track the development of humanity and the emissions and see a direct correlation. It's very clear when you plot it, and it's not
Jud, we know that. We're trying to get you to fix it. You know that.
I know. We'll work with it again. I'm not a biologist, so I'll need to.
I'm not a biologist, Jim.
I know.
I'm an engineer, Jim, not a biologist.
Damn it, Jim.
But there's certainly mechanisms of catalysis where you convert one material, say CO2, to some other material that becomes beneficial. For instance, as Neil was mentioning, for Mars, they're considering converting that CO2 to rocket fuel. You bring along some additional components, specifically the hydrogen, and you can do a reaction to take the CO2 and the hydrogen and make methane. And then you can burn that, which will help you get off the surface of Mars or hop around the surface of Mars, as the case may be.
Okay.
So what you're saying is we need you coming and going in our sports, in our space exploration, and even
Everywhere.
in our survival.
Yeah. I just ask your readers to look around themselves right now, or listeners to look around themselves. And there's glasses, there's metals, they'll call them plastics. I don't allow my students to do that. We call them polymers. And then all of those have been engineered. Even wood is engineered to a degree from a shaping perspective, and some is preferentially planted.
All right, guys, I think we're going to have to call it quits there. But the lesson here is that we need Jud for all of civilization. For everything.
Put me on once a week, $50, 50. I'll charge you. Nah, we'll make it $100 now.
All right, we'll talk. I just know that we have scratched the surface with the
We'll get my people to call your people, Jud.
Yeah.
We'll make that happen. All right, guys. Jud, it's been really good to have you this second, or is it third time on this program? And this will happen again for sure. And we'll have you cross over into our Star Talk flagship and talk about just a broader conversation about materials and civilization. We got this. All right, Chuck, Gary, always good to have you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Neil.
This has been Star Talk Sports Edition. It's a materials world. Neil deGrasse Tyson here, your personal astrophysicist. Keep looking up.